Hello and welcome back to my photography channel. Today we're going to be looking at a camera by Fujifilm, the Fujifilm X-T2. Now this was released back in 2016 and it has a crop factor sensor of 1.5. It has a 24.3 megapixel sensor. It does do 4K at 30 frames per second, but I have found the 1080p at 60 frames per second to look better. Smoother obviously, but if you are in the market for a new camera and you're looking for a hybrid camera, then this is a very good option because it does both stills and videography very well. It blends the size, the feel, the ergonomics very well. One of the main pros about the X-T2 is that on the top plate dial you've got all the information that you would need. So all you've got to do is look down when you are shooting, and it saves a lot of time because otherwise you'd have to go into the menu system of a camera and trawl through all the settings just to change a setting, but effectively you've got it all in front of you, so it's good to go, which is another good thing when you're outside if you are a landscape shooter, because it's weather sealed body. And not long after I had it, I've had the camera about 9 months now, and not long after I started using it I took it out in quite heavy rain, and it handled the rain quite well actually, yeah. So it's got the weather sealing in place, which is handy to know. With the ISO range, the native ISO starts at 200, so it is quite modest, it's not very low, but you do get clean images at ISO 200, and I have noticed that the dynamic range has surprised me, and you can push it quite far with some of the hidden details, especially if you do shoot RAW. I've been shooting JPEGs the last 5 months, and you can push it quite far with the RAW files that you get out of it, but obviously another pro of Fujifilm cameras is the colours that they get straight out of camera with the JPEG files. So if you are someone that doesn't enjoy a lot of post-processing work, it will save you a lot of time, because 98% of the time the files that you're getting straight out of the Fujifilm, you don't need to do much editing at all, if any, and that is something I really like about the Fujifilm cameras. With the actual design of the camera, you've got dual card slots, SD card slots, which is very handy if you do shoot video, as you can have a dedicated memory card, like a higher file size, like a 64GB for video, and if you're shooting it, it will go onto that card, or if you've got like a faster readout card, then it will go onto that and use that for video. So that's quite handy to have the dual card slots as well. The monochrome film simulation, because you do get film simulations with Fujifilm cameras, the monochrome one is beautiful. It really gives you an insight into shooting black and white, because you've got like the contrasts and the colours and the shadows when in monochrome mode, and because of the very bright EVF that you get on the camera, the electronic viewfinder, it sort of inspires more confidence in you when you're shooting black and white. Obviously, maybe with DSLRs, they're not all electronic viewfinders, so they won't be quite as bright and crisp. But with the X-T2, you are getting a very clear image when you look through the viewfinder. And if you are someone that enjoys looking through a viewfinder, you will find that you just stick to that and you don't use the screen a whole lot. Maybe for video, you might use the screen. It also has a joystick controller, which I suppose a few years ago was a bit of a gimmick, and to some it still is. And it's not a necessity, but once you've been using a joystick, you really wouldn't want to go back. And if you know sort of thing, it's a nice feature to have, and you'll find that you won't really use the D-pad. So since I've owned this camera, it has changed my approach to photography, and obviously it's made me realise that you can get a good shot from any camera, so you don't have to have a ridiculously expensive camera. And that leads me on to my next pro about this camera, is that you can pick one up on the used market for just under £500. So yeah, it's a very competitive price for what you get. You get the 4K 30 if you need that for videography. However, I do find the 1080p at 60 frames per second to look better and to look smoother. Obviously it's not going to have the built-in image stabilization, but you can get that with the lenses, and if you are looking to get a gimbal, then that serves for that purpose as well if you are into videography. But it is just a very good hybrid camera, an all-rounder for stills and photography, and it does that very well if you do need it. We've had a look at some of the pros of the camera, Now let's look at some of the cons that I've found personally. Recently I've started to notice a bit of screen lag, which is on the big rear screen. This is a power saving feature, which if the camera's idle for 15-20 seconds and you've not really been looking at it, if you sort of move the camera and sway it, you will notice that the refresh rate is lower and you'll see some screen lag. It isn't a deal breaker by any standards, but it's just something that you will notice with the camera. Another con for me personally is the grip. For people that have big hands or long fingers, the grip isn't substantial. You can obviously opt for another camera like the Fuji X-H1, which features a bigger grip, and they've just come out with a new camera as well that has a bigger grip. But if you are someone that wants a bigger grip, then maybe this camera would put you off, as DSLRs do have that more comfortable feeling grip. Even the Nikon Z50, if we're talking about other mirrorless cameras as well, that has a more substantial grip. It's not a deal breaker again, and you do get used to it, but obviously it's something as well that's maybe a con with this. Yeah, maybe one more con is the long exposure settings are quite complicated. I've not found them to be as straightforward as, say, when I was using a Canon. And if you are an astrophotographer, or even if you just do a little bit of astro, you might find it a bit fiddly to play around with the long exposure settings in the dark, you know, at night time, if you're on location out in the middle of nowhere and you haven't got much light, or even if the light is fading quick and you're trying to get a shot of fast flowing water and slow it down like a waterfall and that. And yeah, the long exposure settings aren't that easy to get hold of. But with this camera, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. And for a camera that's now nearly 5 years old, it certainly still holds up against some of the other options available. And with the megapixels, you don't really need any more megapixels. And if you're looking for something that will serve your purpose for stills photography and videography, then this is a very good option, especially if you purchase like a gimbal with it and you mount it on a gimbal. You can get very smooth footage, especially when you slow it down as well. So yeah, there's very, very good reasons to own an X-T2, especially since you can get one for under £500 now. So yeah, definitely recommend it. As I say, I've been using it for about 9 months, and it's definitely changed the way that I approach photography. I wouldn't necessarily say it slows the photography down, but it does make you think more about composing your shot. It makes you think about some of the film simulations. If film simulations aren't for you, you don't even need to use them anyway, because they have a standard film simulation to use which is called Provia, and you can just shoot with that, and you still might find that you don't need to do much post work. Obviously you do get fantastic lens options with Fujifilm, and they're also starting to bring out, third-party companies are starting to bring out their own glass for Fujifilm as well. So that's quite interesting as well, because if again you are on a budget, you've always got that option as well for the future, which they're bringing out more and more third-party lenses for Fujifilm. So yes, that was my review of the Fujifilm X-T2. Thank you for watching.